In this video I'll set up the Mobula7 with the Turnigy Evolution. Here's the Mobula7 with the canopy already taken off. And I'll just go through the whole process of binding it, configuring the radio, and then setting up in Betaflight the various things like battery voltage, arming, and a few other things. So stay with me and I'll give you hopefully a simple recipe that you can follow that will end you up with a working flyable quad that you know how to tune and modify or make small improvements on yourself. So I've been flying this radio with my 5-inch quad. It's a much bigger model than the Mobula7. To give you an idea, that's the quad that I've been flying, and this is from the $99 build from UAV Futures from Stu. But I thought it was time to fly something smaller that I could just fly indoors and have a bit more fun. So the Mobula7 is the one that I purchased, and yeah, so far I'm very happy with it. So the first thing to do here on the radio is add a new model. Basically all the setup in here about alarms and other things are all tuned for my 5-inch quad. But if I'm going to set up a new model for the Mobula7, I'll pretty much have to start over from scratch. So let's do that. I'll just go to the settings here, and in the menu there is select model. So when I there's select model. So when I press select model, it says right now this is number 1, which is my 5-inch quad. And now I'm going to go to model number 2. I exit out of there, and we're good. So now you see that the default settings of the Evolution are in place, and yeah, all these colors are here, and alarms and other things. I don't necessarily want that, but for the moment we'll just leave that as is, and I'll show you step by step on how to improve on that, because I prefer my radio to be quiet and only beep at me when something's wrong. So now that I've selected the model, I will have to go here where it says output mode. So it's set to PWM and iBus, but for the Mobula7 I'm going to set that to PPM and SBus. And so with these settings I'll go into the binding mode. So bind mode is here as well, RX bind. So we'll just leave this radio here for the moment. Now to bind it with the Mobula7, all I need to do is apply power to the USB port. It doesn't require that you plug in the batteries for it. So I'll just do this. That's just a little micro USB connection, and here I've got a little power bank that I can just power the quad from. So just gonna leave that off for the moment. So what I do here is I press the bind button, and I can feel it's a little bit tactile, so you can feel when it's actually engaged. So I've held that now down, and so you can see then on the radio when I press RX bind that we have a connection. So I press the bind button, then I turn on the Mobula7. Now I can release the button, and you can see this blinking, which is relatively fast. That it is in bind mode. So now when I go to the radio and I say RX bind, things start beeping, but basically what you pay attention to is that the Mobula7 lights are now solid, and that indicates that we've got a successful bind. So why is this now beeping at us? Well, The reason is most likely that something is not right. And when you look here, RX, that's blinking, and that is the battery. So obviously it's not getting an idea that the battery is full enough. Well, that's normal because there's no batteries connected. So if I were to apply battery power to this, let's just undo the USB connection. And I'll just for fun, I'll just add the two batteries here. That should then show. Here we go. So battery voltage, state is now pretty full, and it's all happy with that. So no, it's no longer beeping. There's a few other things that I do in the radio just to make it quieter. Another thing that I do is for the battery voltage, when you press on the top right corner there, you can set up the battery voltage. So here you can see high voltage. Yep, that's the Mobula7 again. 6 volts. Well, it's running off 2 LiPos, which is about 4.25 volts when fully charged. So if I set it to 8.5, that'll be a full battery. So I can make that 8.5 on a full battery. And when is it low? Well, I probably want to stop flying when the battery, each battery is down to about 3.1 volts, 3.2, 3.1 volts. That's really the lowest you want to go. So if I set, because there's 2 batteries, if I set it to 6.2, then we are there. And I set that on there as well. And that just means that when the batteries on the Mobula7 are getting down to 3.1 volts, the radio will actually start making noise. So with all that done, the RX power battery indicator from the quad is now sort of tuned to those settings. And you can see that when I unplug, well, that's probably not a good test, but if you were to run with lower voltage batteries, that indicator should change. The software to configure your flight controller is called Betaflight Configurator, and by simply typing that into the search bar of your browser or in Google, you will find the link that brings you to the GitHub page where all the software is hosted. So clicking on there brings you to the site where the Betaflight Configurator software lives, and there's a few versions that you can download. One is an RPM for the Red Hat Package Manager, which is Linux. Then you have a Windows 32-bit version, which is also suitable for Windows 64-bit. Then you have a Debian version for 64-bit, that's also Linux. Another 64-bit version for Linux. And then we have a Mac OS version. Because I'm running on Windows 7 64-bit, I'm just going to run the Windows version. Even though it says Win32, it says here, even for Windows 7, 8 and 10, just grab the Win32 exe. So I'll just save that to the desktop. And run the installation. And then once you've installed the software, you'll find a link in the start menu, and then we can start up Betaflight. So now that Betaflight is installed, we need to confirm that the drivers are present for the serial port that the quad communicates with the computer with. It is a serial over USB, and the flight controller uses a specific driver for that. So when I plug in the Mobula7 USB port, starts beeping a few times, and in the Windows Device Manager we can now see an exclamation mark here, or question mark, for the STM32 Virtual COM Port. That's under other devices. Ideally what we want is to have a COM port, and obviously it's missing the driver for it, so that's our next step, to find the driver for this, install it, and then this port should be available here under ports. So on the Betaflight website at GitHub, there's a few links to drivers, but you can also go to STM and find the drivers for it. So because the name in the device manager for the driver that could not be found was STM32 Virtual COM Port, I'm just going to type in STM32 Virtual COM Port drivers into Google, and the link that comes up goes straight to ST. And here you can see that it is already the first link that we need to have. So we click on that one. We'll let the page load. And in order for us to get the software, this link here, we'll have to register with an email address. So here we have the version of the STM32, version 150. And if we click on Get Software, it says, yep, accept. So now you get to this page where you need to provide an email address. I just tend to go with some Mailinator throwaway email address. Let's make it Mobula7 at mailinator.com, and I'm just going to use that as the email address. Scrolling further down, I click on the download button, and it says, yep, an email has been sent. So if I now go to Mailinator, that email address in, it will just create that mailbox on the fly. And here is the link that was just sent to us. So now I can just click on the link to download the software. Comes up automatically with the download option. I just click Save File. So then you just save the file to desktop. That's a zip file, and that's that one there. And I can just unzip that and show you what's in there. It's got setup files for Windows 8, Windows 7, 32 and 64 bits. We're running 64 bits here, so I'll just grab that one. Close that. Just put that aside. And then I can just run that and do the installation. And I think you need to enter your name somewhere, but that's not critical for anything. And then once you've installed the drivers, you can then plug in the quad again and see if the device is being recognized. The drivers are now installed, and I'll insert the USB port to the Mobula7. Installing device drivers, installed successfully, and as you can see, the COM port has now been populated under here, and now we have the ST Microelectronics Virtual COM Port, and it just assigns a number, whatever one is the next one that's free. It doesn't have to be COM2 or 3, it could be anything, even up to COM15 or something like that. So don't pay too much attention to that number, but you do want to find out what COM port it is on, and in this case it's COM5. So we can close that. Now we can start Betaflight configurator and see if we can make a connection to the Mobula7. So it's important to select the right COM port here. This is COM5. Just leave that number there, and when we now click on connect, we have a connection to the Mobula7. And if I, for instance, were to rotate the quad, spin it around, you can see that that is already moving on the Betaflight configurator. So we have a successful connection, and at least we know that the gyro is working. One of the things that the software allows you to do is to calibrate the accelerometer, which is done by pressing this button here, which is probably a good thing to do at least once. Make sure that the quad is at least level, and then just press that, and then it's done. So now we get to the point where we need to set up Betaflight for this particular quad. There's a couple of settings you need to go through. Ports, leave that alone. That's pretty much all what it needs to be. Under configuration, I've read on some forums that the D-Shot 600 works, may give better results if you set up the D-Shot 300. It's just a slightly different protocol to talk to the ESCs. Then everything else here looks alright. There's more further down. Let's go there. That's at 8 kilohertz. We can safely set that, I believe, to 2 kilohertz for both. That's just how often the sensors are being checked, and is an indication of how fast the quad can respond to changes in how it's oriented. We can put a craft name here. I've reset all these settings, so yours probably has Mobula7 already in there. For the FlySky version, you want indeed SPI receiver support, because the built-in receiver on the flight controller talks to the chip over SPI. And the other thing you want to double check is that you're using the FlySky 2A protocol. It may be compatible with the normal FlySky, that is ADHDS or something, version 2 or version 1. So I'll just leave it to FlySky version 2A. Then anti-gravity can be turned off, dynamic filter can be turned off, and you probably want to have telemetry going back to your Evolution, and OSD. That's probably all you need there. There's a lot of beeper settings are all turned on. You can leave that if you want to. It just beeps a bit more, but generally I turn off quite a few, like for instance GPS. It doesn't have GPS, so you don't need that. But we'll just leave that as it is. Let's do a save and reboot. That's just a reboot of the flight controller. Yeah, and we're automatically connected again. There is a button or a switch here as well for enable expert mode. I tend to want to do that just so that I know where all the options are. So we've done configuration, power and battery. So for the minimum cell voltage, 3.3 is probably a bit high. We can make that, I'd say 3.1 volts. Make that 3.1 as well. 4.3 is sort of the maximum. The maximum is only used to on an indicator to give a full range, so you know when it's full. If it's more than 100%, it doesn't matter, but at least it gives you the correct reading. That is all good. We'll press save there. Fail saves. You can do all sorts of things with fail saves here. What it needs to do when it detects that the transmitter has lost connectivity or so. I'm just going to leave that as it is for the moment. Now we go to receiver, and here's where things get a bit more interesting, because this is now talking to the transmitter, and you need to make sure that that's all working properly. So in this screen we can get an indication of the channels that are being sent from the transmitter to the receiver on the Mobula7. So what I'll first do is attach the batteries, because I know that as soon as I connect the Evolution, it will start beeping at me because it can't find any batteries, and it gives me then an under voltage alarm. So I'll just add 2 batteries on the Mobula7. Here we go. And now you can see the voltage jumping up to 8.6, 8.8 volts. So that's all looking good, 8.5. Yeah. So we can now also confirm that the battery voltage setting are working. Now when I turn on the Evolution and I start moving the sticks, things like this happen. So that's all good. But is it actually all correct? So let's find out. If I do throttle, I can see that the throttle channel goes up and down. That's perfect. In the lowest setting and lowest position, it is about 970 on mine, and maximum 1990. So it goes from about 1000 to 2000. This is yaw, and indeed yaw is indeed, that's the Mobula7 trying to do things. Yaw is indeed the right channel. I'm using a mode 2 Evolution, which means that throttle is on the left. And this is roll, and indeed all those channels are correct. And this is pitch, and pitch does exactly what it needs to do. So that's a good start already. At least we know that the main 4 channels are properly mapped in this setup. And it is important here to look as well at that the channel map is AETR, aileron, elevons, throttle and rudder, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how the mapping is also in the Evolution, and that's how the channels are mapped. The next step happens on the radio again, and this is, we need to set up a few channels, a few auxiliary channels. What I basically want is to have the arm switch be this one. So if it's in a middle position or in the extreme position, the quad will be armed, and this is in the top position, it's in the unarmed state. And the other 3 position switch here I want to use for the various flight modes. So horizon mode, angle mode, and rate mode, if that's all supported by the flight controller. It basically means that if it's in the top position, which is the default, otherwise the radio won't switch on. In the top position I want it to be in horizon mode. That way the quad will just level itself, and it's easiest to fly. Now I've noticed that here the default setting is set to fly mode, mode 01. To be honest, I don't really know what that does. I always turn that off. I click there. It's mapped to channel 5, but I want to use that channel 5. That's that auxiliary channel. So I'll just press the off button there, and that will turn it off. Now it's set to channel 0, or channel null, and if I get out of there, you'll see fly mode is off. So the next step then will be to set up the aux channels. So in the menu, go, oh, not that one, aux channels. 5 is set to 0, and I want 5 to be actually this one here. That's a little beeper switch, so that when I flick this one, the quad will start beeping, and if I'm trying to find out where it is, it will beep at me. So right now it's set to none. That's because I disabled channel 5 on the flight mode. If I press that, now I can select a switch, and I want it to be switch A, which is, this is switch A. So that's good. The second channel is channel number 6, and that one I want to be the variable resistor. Actually, you can press that in and out, don't know why. I'm not really using that. I'm thinking of using that for flip over mode, so that if it falls upside down, that it can automatically righten itself up. But I'll just change that over to variable resistor. There's only one on here, so we'll leave that at VRA. That's good as well. Channel 7, that's the switch here on the side. Well, channel 7 is free, and I want it to be the switch on the side, so I'll do switch, and I do switch B. That's switch B, and switch C is on that side. I'm doing switch C. So now I've got everything mapped the way I want to. So channel 5 is switch A. Channel 6 is this variable resistor thingy. Channel 7 switch number B, and channel 8 is switches number C. Go OK on that. So that's one thing that's important for arming the thing in Betaflight, because that's where we need to set it up. So let's go back to Betaflight. Right, so I'm gonna insert the USB port to the quad again. I've got the batteries also connected and the radio is on. So if I now go to receiver and I wiggle the sticks, this is throttle, all of that makes sense. So how now do I arm the quad? Well, this is where we go to modes. Here are several functions that you can configure. All sorts of things. Here's that flip over after crash thing. It's got a few other things as well, but the most important thing before we can even fly it is to arm it. So how do we arm this? Well, let's go to receiver again, and if I now flick this switch here, so it's now in the top position. If I flick it one down, I'll see if I can bring all of that into camera view. Press one down. Aux 4 went halfway. If I press it one more down, aux 4 now went all the way to maximum. So that's 1990, 1480, 970. Those are just the values that I'm reading here on the screen. And what I want to do is have it arm in the middle position, so that if I accidentally bump it, I'm in a safe way unarming the quad. That whatever I do, the easiest thing to do is for it to unarm, disarm. So we need aux 4 in order to do that. How do we do that? In Betaflight, we go to modes. Here's our arm, and we say we want aux 4 to be able to arm it. And now you can slide what range the switch needs to be at in order for it to arm. And you can make that bigger and smaller. If I now press the switch on the radio here, and I put that in the middle position. Yeah. It now goes into the middle position here. The yellow dot moved from there to there. And if I do it one more, it's in that range there. So that's the bottom position, but I want it to be in the middle position. So if I slide that, so right now this marker position is in the middle, and it is within this range, so the switch triggers the arm. So that's pretty much all we had to do in order to make that switch arm the quad when the switch is in the middle position. So if I click save, so that's now saved into the quad. If I now flick the switch in the middle position, the quad is armed. And you can hear sounds now from the Mobula7. I'll show you with, probably has some lights as well. This is when it's in the unarmed mode. The switch is now in the off position at the top. If I put it in the middle position, so that's definitely the Mobula7 saying to us, yep, we're ready for action. So that's all good. And I'll put it back in the off position now. So let's see how that now behaves with the radio. I've got the quad still powered from batteries. I've also still have the USB cord plugged in to the laptop. Take that out, and then we can go and arm the quad. So I'll put that in the middle position. That's not good. If you hear that beeping, that means it's not armed. Let's try that again. No. Still some kind of fault mode. It's probably best to remove the batteries briefly and then turn it back on. See if I now, yeah, battery voltage is coming up. See if I now put it in the middle position to arm, that's good. One long and one short. So that means that if I now apply some throttle, it's doing what it's supposed to do. So those are the initial controls to get it going. You can already fly it now if you want to. So all of that works fine. You can set up other channels to experiment with different fly modes, but basically that's the setup. Okay, so binding the Mobula7 is already done. I'm just gonna attach the batteries, and you can now see on the radio that battery comes up to pretty much full. Not sure if you can see that in the light. So RX is the battery on the Mobula7. So if I put that in there, the arm switch in this case is this one here. So if I put that one position lower, the quad is now mounted, but I've set it in Betaflight so that it won't spin the props until I start giving it throttle. There it goes. So let's give this a flight.